So you've been around long enough that you know I like to tell stories. So this is one of my favorite stories I told you about a year ago. A woman writes, "My mother makes the greatest pancakes in all the world." I know this because she told us so. When I was a child, I would wake up in the morning and I would smell the aroma of the pancakes cooking downstairs. And when I got to the kitchen, she was just about to put the first batch of pancakes in front of my older brother. And she'd say, "Aren't those good? Your mother makes the greatest pancakes in all the world." And then I watched as she made a batch for my younger brother and sister, and she'd put it down and say, "Your mother makes the greatest pancakes in all the world." And then she'd make a batch for me, and she'd set it down in front of me, and what did she say? "Your mother makes the greatest pancakes in all the world." And the woman went on to say, "I believe my mother made the greatest pancakes in all the world almost until I was adult. When I went off to college, on the weekends, I would get invited to my friends' houses. And sometimes their parents would serve pancakes. And some of them were pretty good. And some were even better than my mother's. So I began to doubt what she told me. So the next time I was home on college break and I woke up and I smelled the pancakes from the kitchen, I decided, well, maybe it's time to go straighten the old girl out. So I went down and I said, "Mother, I have something to talk to you. It's about your pancakes." And my mother said, "Oh, I suppose you've been having pancakes at your friend's house." Well, yes, that's true. And I suppose some were pretty good. And I bet some were even better than mine. And so the woman said, "So, Mother, why did you tell us every time you made pancakes that your pancakes was the greatest in all the world?" And her mother said, "I told you my pancakes were the greatest in all the world so that every time you smell the pancakes baking or cooking, you think of me." Well, I'll think of a lot of things when I think about Union Congregational Church, United Church of Christ. I'll think about your faith, and I'll think about your devotion, and I'll think about your passion for social justice and for being involved in the world. And I'll think about your love to be an open and affirming congregation where all are welcome, no matter who you are or where you are on life's journey. And I'll think about your love of music and your passion for the development of young people and children, whether of our congregation or of our community. And I remember your zeal and your love. I don't know whether you remember, I keep telling the story about how we found each other. And every time I tell it, people say, "Oh, I didn't know that." So maybe I didn't tell it enough when I first came. But the way we found each other was because of the United Church of Christ. I was serving as the transitional senior minister for another Union Congregational Church called the Union Church of Hinsdale, Illinois. And I was invited by the denomination to come to a stewardship workshop for senior ministers in Boulder, Colorado. And so it was a 3-day workshop. And while I was there, about the second day, a denominational executive was there, and he kind of looked at me funny, and he said, "So where are you on your transitional work in Hinsdale?" And so I told him, and he said, "Well, I just got a call from the Central Atlantic Conference minister, and he's looking for somebody good to be the interim in a church in New Jersey. Can I give him your name?" And I said, "Well, of course." And about 3 weeks later, Catherine Spinella called me up and said, "Can we talk?" Because she was the chair of the search committee. And so that began the whole process of how I ended up here. Of course, after she called me, we didn't talk again for about 3 weeks, because about a week and a half after she called, something called Hurricane Sandy kind of came to town. And so she was kind of distracted. And I found out when I called her one day that her house had become sort of a way station of, since she had electricity, people were coming to her house to stay or to charge their batteries or to, charge up their phones or whatever. So you were a little distracted about all that when I first arrived. My wife and I had a chance to go to the 9/11 memorial since it's opened, and we felt your pain because of that event. And so we understand the things that have happened to this part of the country in the last years. And so our thoughts are with you as we move forward from all those things. When I came to the congregation, I was aware that you were a little bit back on your heels because of Hurricane Sandy and the departure of your longtime minister. But you accepted us well, and you were very receptive to my transitional techniques and talking about speaking the truth in love and being hard on issues and soft on people, and we came along quite well. And so I think you're a wonderful, dynamic congregation, and I think you're ready to go forward with your new pastor and senior minister. I know today is a lot about me and Nancy, but I am a transitional minister, so I always have to get you to think about the future. And I want you to think about how exciting the next few months are going to be. Whenever a new minister comes, it's always exciting. It's wonderful and energetic, and somebody comes in with all this passion and energy and wants to kind of get to know you better and start a long-term relationship. And I think it's going to be wonderful. Nobody knows what it's going to be, but we know one thing for sure. It's going to be different. So I invite you to be ready and be caught up in the wonder of what the Spirit is doing to energize your congregation. There's sociologists and others who have determined that when you study, especially the American culture, that it seems that every other generation becomes a dominant generation that affects the next 40 years or so. And my generation, the baby boomer generation, is one of those generations. And our activities changed the world. It was about how to think about things and what kind of attitudes to have and what kind of music to play, all those things. And that's kind of been pervasive about the last 40 years. But now, it looks like the next dominant generation will be the millennials, those born from about 1981 to about 2000. And they'll become the next generation that'll change the world. And they're already changing the world. They're the ones who are very open to being acceptable, whether anybody is gay or straight or transgender or whatever. They're just people. And it's changing the world about our attitudes and lifestyles and what we think about things. But one thing I've discovered about the new generation, the millennials, is that they're not much into joining big organizations like churches and other things. And so churches have to rethink how they do church, because the message never changes, but the way you deliver the message and the way you live the message and do the message always changes. So I invite you to be really good sports for your new minister who's on that cusp of that new generation, and allow his ideas and enthusiasm to blend with your core values and continue to be a vibrant congregation. I don't know where you're aware of this, but in the United Church of Christ, you're a leadership congregation. You've always taken the lead to do new things, to be innovative, to be out there, to be standing up for justice, to be living your faith. You've always done those things, and so I invite you to continue that tradition, to keep boldly walking into the future, living our faith, and helping our world to be a better place, because that's what you're all equipped to do. So I invite you to continue that with Pastor Dave. So a few weeks ago, I was thumbing through the TV and on the cable station. I ran across an old movie on Saturday afternoon, The Field of Dreams. Remember Field of Dreams? the 1989 movie of Kevin Costner and James Earl Jones and others. But what really caught me about that movie was the scenes that Burt Lancaster was in. I forgot that he was in this movie. And Burt Lancaster in the 1940s and 50s and 60s was a very powerful, dynamic actor. But by 1989, he was 75 years old. And so he played a 75-year-old country doctor. And in the story, his character had passed away, but Kevin Costner had a vision of him and found out that he had grown up, coming up to the major leagues late in the season one year, but he never got the bat. So his desire was to face major league pitching. But he was sent back down, and then he went to medical school and never got his dream fulfilled. So as the movie progresses, what happens is that the main characters are going back to the Field of Dreams from Minnesota, and they run into a young future doctor who was hitchhiking, and they take him to the Field of Dreams. And because in the movie, Kevin Costner had made a baseball field out of a cornfield, and when he did this, 1919 baseball players and others came out of the cornfields and played baseball. And so this young kid went out into the field, and he got to sit on the bench, and one day he got called, and he got to get that bat. And he got a swing against major league pitching. But right after his bat, back in the real world, the little girl of the main character fell off the bleachers, and she had been eating a hot dog, and so it got lodged in her throat, and she was choking. And so the young person saw that and ran over to the foul line, and when he looked at the foul line, he stepped over and turned into Burt Lancaster, the 75-year-old man. And he went over and he gave assistance and saved a little girl. And when the main character realized and was relieved that his daughter was okay, he said, "Oh gosh, you can't go back. You can't go back on the field." And he said, "That's all right. I got my shot." And so Burt Lancaster went over to the corn, looked back one more time, walked into the corn, and through the wonders of cinematography, vanished into thin air. I think that's a good metaphor for transitional ministry. Transitional ministry is about pastors coming into a church in between the settled minister and doing their thing and then just kind of vanishing away so that the congregation can go on in faith and devotion and love. But when I think about it, that field of dreams or that vanishing is kind of the way life always is. We all come into the world and make our mark, and then we kind of vanish. I don't know whether you remember this or not, but Reverend Stephanie and I are from the same seminary class. We were the class of Eden Theological Seminary of 1976. Stephanie was, of course, the head of our class. Did you expect anything less? And we've had almost 40 years of wonderful ministry, of serving in various places all around the country. And we've followed each other's career all through those years. But we're getting to the place where it's time for our generation to kind of vanish. We still have things to do, but it's time for the next generation to come along and to live the faith and to rediscover what it means to have faith and hope and love and how to live it with integrity. So I'm excited for you. I'm excited for what's going to be coming your way. And as we honor and cherish the past, we look with faith to the future. And we trust that God has good things in store for you. So like the Apostle Paul, who in his generation had a few things to say to his generation, I'd like to say, so I appeal to you, brothers and sisters, by the mercies of God, to live in such a way that your life is like a spiritual worship. And I invite you to not conform completely to the ways of this world, but to be transformed by the power of God. To be transformed in your mind on how you look at life and where you put your priorities and what you think is important. And by the grace given you, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but to think in sober judgment, each according to the measure of the faith as God has assigned to you. And let your love be genuine. Hate what is evil, hold fast to what is good, love one another with mutual affection, and outdo one another in showing honor. Do not lag in zeal. I had a confirmation class one time who decided, when I asked them what their gift of the Spirit was, they decided they had zeal. And they did. And they shared it in the church. Be ardent in spirit, serve the Lord, rejoice in hope, be patient in suffering, persevere in prayer, contribute to the needs of the saints, meaning those in the church, extend hospitality to the stranger. Bless those who persecute you, bless, do not curse, and rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep, live in harmony with one another. And remember, to sing harmony, you have to listen to each other. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Do not claim to be wiser than you are. Do not repay anyone evil for evil, but take thought for what is noble in the sight of all. If it is possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Beloved, never revenge yourself, but leave room for the wrath of God. Know if your enemies are hungry, feed them. If they are thirsty, give them something to drink. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. My friends, this is the practice of the church in a nutshell. So go in faith, go in hope, but most of all, go in love. God bless you all. Amen.